So the reason I actually started teaching this, also trying to help a lot of product managers, is that we see that 80 to 85% of AI projects really sink in the industry. And you can Google this. There are a lot of analysis, market analysis, and project analysis on the internet, and you will see these numbers, similar numbers. Now, my goal is to help product managers to lower this number. Now, the biggest problem I see in the industry is that the gap between business, engineering, and science. And the reason is that they talk a different language. So business folks actually talk sustainability, brand, customer. And that's something you know from product management, right? But the engineering, as you know, talks a different language: reliability, performance, capacity. And in the past, most of the software product managers were actually okay to manage these two domains. The difference is that today AI science is a new part, and they also talk different language. And this is reinforcement learning, deep learning, machine translation, and other lingo. Now, the product manager's role today is extended to AI science as well to close the gap. Now, what I see in the industry is that when a company starts AI integration, the first thing they do is, because there's a disconnect between these domains, the first thing they do, they pick a technology like PyTorch, Keras, TensorFlow, something like that. Then they dive into it and they think they're converting their company in the AI era and they're becoming an artificial intelligence company. However, this is of course not the case. A tool never saved the company. As you know, as a product manager, sustainable profitability doesn't mean really just one tool. You cannot pick something and go with that. So the misunderstanding is also at the technology level. It is really not one tool. It is the whole ecosystem. And when you think of a simple problem like computer vision, for example, 80 to 90% of computer vision problems are still software engineering problems. And machine learning is really just in some small places. And having this understanding as an AI product manager is really important to create successful AI projects. Now, from the business side, there are also gaps. When people start, they don't think that they have to hit all three requirements. First of all, the company has to be willing to implement AI systems. They have to be ready to implement AI systems, and they have to be able to implement AI systems. It is less likely that all three match all the time. And in sales, if you're in sales, you most probably know getting a company to the level of hitting all 3 points is really not easy, and you have to work on it. It could be that your leaders are not really willing, or maybe the leaders are not ready and maybe not able. Maybe there is no investment, there is no budget, or maybe there are people who are really standing in the way. So as a product manager, you also have to think about your strategy side more. How can I actually get buy-in to this AI project, and how can I actually deliver this on time? Now, when we look at a standard company, actually the whole industry, where companies are and where they're going, so as an AI product manager, you look at your company from this perspective and try to get to the next level. And it can be really challenging if you're working in an AI ignorant or AI resistant company where people still don't have the buy-in by default, and you really have to work on the readiness aspect. However, if you're working on an AI-guided, AI-driving company, then you will definitely have easier buy-in. But at the same time, maybe they are not able to. Maybe you still have to get the budget right. So these are the AI product management focus areas, and so I can simplify the whole requirement into 3 aspects. And first is, I think as an AI product manager, you have to have a strategic perspective to your AI projects. And famous management scientist Henry Mintzberg said that it is a strategic change. Bring a new emergent technology to your company is not just throwing a new tool or throwing actually some code. It is more about bringing a whole new strategy. That means you have to exclude some unrealized strategies and go from there. And in this particular case, of course, he wasn't talking about AI when he published this a long time ago. He was talking about any environmental change, which is in this case AI. The second aspect I think AI product managers have to deal with is the new agile AI product development lifecycle. And in the past, that wasn't the case. In software development life cycles are different. You don't have the data science aspect. You don't have this iterative research and experimentation going on. It is more like happening on the left upper side here. But with the introduction of data scientists, the whole development lifecycle changed and it became actually more iterative than it was before. So this is another aspect you have to take into account when you're going into AI product management. And the third one, last one, I think is the AI ecosystem. Any AI product manager has to know the AI ecosystem. If you don't know the AI applications, how you manipulate data, how AI algorithms work, or what are the AI platforms, or what are the infrastructure elements, how do you do risk management on AI projects, it is highly likely that these AI projects will fail. That's why this is another aspect you need to learn and actually apply it at your work. So this is a very quick overview of AI product management. So I mentioned about AI process, AI ecosystem, AI strategy, and of course, one thing, if you're not a product manager, or if you don't have the core product management skills, none of them will work. So I have a lot of data scientists, software engineers coming to me. They want to be a product manager, and they say, okay, I know how to train machine learning models. I know the technical side. What do I have to learn? Of course, core product management skills. And without the core product management skills, the success of your project is really low. And I can tell you 80% of the time, you will be using your core product management skills as an AI product manager. And that's why strengthening those, understanding the frameworks and understanding how those frameworks apply to AI projects is really important. So today we have actually with me total 4 AI product managers from the industry, and Ali couldn't join, sorry for that. But we have quite a bit of questions. I actually received a lot of questions from the audience, and I will introduce our guest today, and we can actually dive directly into the questions. So Shyamala is an expert in autonomous digital assistant, vision, conversational AI, and UX with actually more than 20 years in the industry. So her design and research work is actually presented nationally and including internationally to general and field specific audiences. And she is very active in the community. So if you didn't connect with her so far on LinkedIn, I actually suggest to do that. Ali, which is not here, was actually going to talk about search, information retrieval, other things, but add him in LinkedIn, so connect with him. He is really friendly. He has actually more than 18 years of industry experience. So Ashok, we have Ashok here today. And Ashok is actually, I worked with Ashok at eBay, and he is actually one of the best product leaders, like director of product managers I've ever worked with. And he is actually also an entrepreneur and great passion into AI, more than 20 years of experience leading products, user experience, AI engineering teams globally in large corporations. And I really enjoyed working with him, and we have great questions to him as well. So we have Manjeet today with us, and Manjeet is actually a result-driven technology leader with more than 17, almost 20 years of experience in product management, software engineering, data science, analytics, strategy, and he's really expert in many areas, including cloud, SaaS, AI ops, AI, IoT, intelligent process automation, mobile platforms, and social media platforms, and so on. So we have a very strong team here today, and I think you're up to a treat. Now, Without further ado, thank you again, guys. Thank you for joining. I think the community is very thankful to you. I received a lot of questions about this. Now, let's start with Ashok. I have some individual questions, then actually we will have some group discussions, but I wanted to really have you hear from these experts, their own stories. So Ashok, I read that in 1999, you co-authored Java 2 network security. So what do you think changed since then in security and with the wider adoption of AI technology? So we are looking at how AI helped the security technology.
Sure. Firstly, hi everyone, and welcome to this panel. Excited to be here, Adnan. Thank you for the opportunity. So Adnan, when you mentioned 1999, I'm probably dating myself here. So I will, to give you a perspective before I jump into what security has changed, if you go back to circa late 1990s, just what did the world look like? To give you perspective, Google had indexed only 26 million pages. In 2016 itself, they had 130 trillion pages. There were no smartphones, no cell phones was itself considered hip. No cloud, no big data. ML and AI was esoteric activities with reputed firms or in the academia, right? So I want to ground that conversation and say, what did security and what did Java security look like? Now, some of the core tenets of security that was put forth then still applies today, right? When we talk about the three-tier architecture or multi-tier architectures, or we talk about data security, network security, cryptography, all of those which we actually authored in that book, some of those foundational principles and tenets still apply today, right? But what has really advanced over the last 20 years has been as we all know, why is AI so popular today? Why are we talking about democratizing AI? Just the massive growth in data, right? And the advancements in computing. Now with that, there have been significant advancements in security. We're talking about cloud security, network security, cryptography. But when it comes specifically to AI, because that's kind of what this discussion is about, I want to touch upon two considerations in, Adnan, you referred to what is called the AI ecosystem, right? And that's very important to understand. One is around AI data security and other is around AI model and system security. When we talk about AI data security, we're always concerned about different threat vectors. How are we exposing the vulnerabilities, right? So how do you protect data and provide access only to those that really need access to the data, right? Let's say it's about the model training or building time. So there have been advancements in anonymization, tokenization of sensitive data, right? Whether it be what we call as PII, personal identifiable information, or the PCI data, which is payments related. So if a data scientist is trying to build a model with student records or life insurance or payment records, how do you let the data scientist still build those models, right? But still not compromise on the sensitivity of the data, right? And the same thing applies when you want to roll out these models in production, where some of these models have to infer from the features, right? So data security advancements is one. The second is around AI model and system security, which is again a key part of the AI ecosystem, right? How do you make sure that the model's integrity is in place, right? How the threat vectors that we always being attacked by with adversarial attacks, right? They are not mutating some of these models, right? The availability of the service is still there, the privacy. So there are ways in which some of these threats can come and poison the model. They can control the model. They can take control of the data. They can steal data. They can even make undesired predictions of the model. So some of these protections are really what are being researched today, are being put in place. And since what we didn't have in the old 1990s, these are the new problems that we are actually trying to solve, and solving them at scale is what is critical here, right? You could always do it on your desktop, on your laptop, but if you have to do it at internet scale, it's a whole different thing. So I just want to give that perspective of the AI ecosystem of data security and the model and system security. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Ashok. That is great. Thank you very much. Now Ali just joined. It's my mistake. Sorry, guys. There are some technical issues. The Zoom link wasn't right. But Ali, welcome. Thank you for joining. And to introduce Ali, Ali is an expert in a wide range of AI products like search, information retrieval, recommendation and ranking, personalization. And he has more than almost 20 years of experience. So I worked with Ali back at Yahoo on recommendation engines and other technologies. And welcome, Ali.
Thank you, Adnan. And sorry, everybody. Yeah, so we had some miscommunication, but I'm happy that I'm here.
Great. So, okay, now let's turn to Shyamala. Shyamala, I have a question. You have an amazing track record in speaking in industry events and engaging with the PM community, right? And you have seen people's curiosity and questions first. And based on the response you get, how do you think is the PM community perceiving AI product management? And is there any wrong perception?
That's a very good question, Adnan. Thank you so much. I should have started from there. Thank you, everyone. So yeah, that's a really good question. I've seen a lot of things, although there's a lot of adoption and a lot of, awareness, which is building up in the community, what I have seen, and you have briefly touched that in your presentation as well, is, the awareness about the technology, the awareness about the tools available and the skills required. So what I have seen is, in the AI community, especially the product managers, they think from a very small perspective, for most of them, I have seen things about, analytics, and only they think like that is the part of AI, right? But analytics is just one part of the entire product which you are talking about. There are many more things. I work in speech recognition system, and working with and talking with these different people, what I have noticed is, there's a different perception. They think like, let's just buy or partner with the services available out there like Serens or, Alexa Skill Kit or Google's Dialogflow, and we should be all good. But they don't understand that that is just a tool which is enabling you, but the heavy lifting you still have to do. So for example, if you have to create a voice utterance, that is a very big part, right? Like if you are creating a natural language model saying like the user wants to know about weather information, there are n number of ways the user can ask for the same information. They can say, what is the weather? Do I need an umbrella? Or, will it rain? And it could be anything. And in order to make it natural, we still have to collect the data. We still need to know where to get that data, how to do the right kind of research and collect all of those different kind of utterances and things. So this is just one example. But what I have seen is, the PMs I have interacted with have a different perspective. They think like, okay, we have the tool, it should be natural language. That is what the tool is all about. But it's not. You still have to feed in the data. You still have to do the research. And I think that is the biggest thing which is missing. The other thing which I have seen, and that is very common, is why are we building the entire thing? Why can't we just buy things? So there's always this build versus buy thing which is coming up, and PM always thinks like, if there is an out of the box solution, why don't I just, adopt that instead of trying to invest and put so much time, effort. But they don't see the competitive advantage we can get if we build something versus buy. So I see a lot of these kind of, perceptions out there.
Thank you, Shyamala. Thank you. That's very, very true. Very on point. So we have Ali. So Ali, you worked on a wide variety of distinct AI technologies ranging from search engines to recommenders to social media. What are the fundamental PM skills that apply to all of this work? What's the cross-cutting PM skills, do you think? Oh.
Okay, I think you can hear me now. Thanks for the question. I think there are a bunch of different things. So some of them are more common, like as general skill sets that you want to have as the PM, and some of them are more specific to the type of products that I've been working and the type of products you're talking about, like which are more like technical products, right? So I think in general, especially for like more like technical products, I think the obvious one is that you have to have, if you don't have a deep knowledge about technology, at least be comfortable with learning and talking to the people that are technical, right? I think that's super important. I've been in a bunch of different companies working on like AI products, and many PMs have this notion that, oh, they have to be experts in ML or AI to be able to be good PMs. I don't think that's true, but you have to be very comfortable talking to engineers and also communicating what they're working on to the leadership team, right? So you need to understand technology and you need to understand the language, but you don't have to be very deep. Like if you are coming from a technical background, of course, that's a bonus. You can even like help the team and like be in the brainstorming session, but that's not necessary. So that's the first one. I think the other one is that this type of products usually requires more cross-functional, cross-organizational work. Like basically you have to work with other teams a lot because many times your customers are the other teams in the company, right? So for example, for Yahoo, when we were working together, so we were working on this personalization platform team, and our customers were basically the main products at Yahoo, like Yahoo homepage, for example, right? So you need to be able to talk to them and work with them very smoothly. In some other products, you own a surface or you own a product and it's basically mostly you. So you talk to users, the actual users, and then you basically build things, right? So here you should be very good of like convincing people. And also, I think the other part that is super important is to get all the inbound requests and understand which ones are more important. So again, like for a personalization platform, I think that's a very good example. So many teams may require help and technology from you guys, from you as a personalization platform. Like how do you prioritize that is important. I think that's a skill set like all PMs should have, but like I think even more important for AI technology. And I think the last thing that I can say for now, and then we can come back to this maybe later, is communication. And what I mean by that is that, again, going back to my first point, because most of the AI products are more technical, there are a lot of people in the company or even outside the company that don't understand what you are doing, right? Don't understand the value that you are bringing to the table. So if you are working, for example, at LinkedIn, and then you are adding a feature that shows that something that is user-facing, I think it's easy to explain to everybody, right? But if you are working on the like a back-end relevance engine of LinkedIn, right? I think it's, although you are doing like as much as the important work or maybe even more important, I think it's hard to show to people that this was the actual like product changes and this was the value that you're getting, right? So I think in that sense, you have to be the champion for the work. And usually as a PM, you are the person that has to do that. Many engineers are focusing on building the technology. You need to give visibility to them and show that this is important. I think that's part of the communication. The other part is in general, be the interface. I think this is true for all the PMs, but again, like more important here, be the interface between the like a very engineering centric team versus other functions and the leadership team, right? How do you translate that work to your like CEO or to your CTO? And the other way around as well, like how do you get the requirements or like the feedback or the input from those people and translate it to something that engineers can understand? I think that part is super important, and people usually don't think about that when they are thinking about AI product management, right? They feel that you have to be technical and that's it, but I think it's more than that. You have to be able to understand different languages and then be the interface between people.
Correct. You're so right. So biggest part of the responsibility comes from actual product management skills, and actually maybe very little from AI know-how. And I think most of the new PMs who get into AI, they don't realize that. But thank you, Ali. That's a great point. And Manjeet, that's you're also founder of Agile Fitness and experienced the CEO had firsthand as well, right? And so what do you think are the biggest differences in terms of responsibility of being an AI product manager in the corporate and being a CEO of a startup that utilizes AI in certain areas?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Adnan. So let me give some background about Agile Fitness. So other than I work in technology industry, I have another innate passion. I'm a certified fitness trainer and nutrition coach. So I've been training people, I would say, from last 10 years. And I started Agile Fitness in 2015 with the goal of helping 10 million people to get more fitter and more healthier. So what we have today is we have an app where, and I think now the model completely transitioned from kind of a hybrid model to more complete online or virtual fitness training and coaching model. So where you sign up the client, you can have them your coaches, and so it's kind of a community of your coaches. And we have, I would say, a community of around 100,000 people on that platform. And if I draw the analogy of some of the AI-related work we did at Agile Fitness in the Agile Fitness product versus I work at ServiceNow. I would say there's a lot of similarity, but at the same time, let me touch base on what are the big differences when I try to see them side by side. So one is consumer product versus an enterprise product, right? Because that it in itself is, when you look at the scale, when you look at the customer behavior, the speed at which customers take your product and services is totally different. Because in my Agile Fitness app, we can build a feature anytime, we can update as fast as we want. Versus, when you think about global 2000, the customers, they don't take innovations as fast as you can build them. And at I think that the biggest challenge that we face when taking some of my existing learning and applying them into this enterprise product is here we had a very fixed environment because we knew that these are the few set of features in our app, versus a platform which can be customized and which can be heavily changed by the customer. That changes your approach totally, because in ServiceNow platform, customer uses our app, but then they also build out a lot of their own applications. They can change the entire data layer behind the scene, all the field name and everything. So what happens is the models that you push out of the box, it does not work. And that's when it comes down to that, hey, do you need a data scientist or the domain expert to use that product? And so I would say, that's where this need of low code, no code requirements came into the play, because one of our initial learning was, having a solution that, that can work is one thing in a more fixed environment versus in an environment where the customer has changed things. And if they have to map those changes to make your model work, it's like, hey, we don't have those expertise in the team. Another point I'll touch on is, I would say, the expectations, because we all use consumer product. We have certain expectations how we use the Google Map or Uber, but when we go to work, those expectations and then those, I think, things are merging very quickly. As in the industry, and we want our enterprise product to work very similar to the our consumer product. So that's where I would say there's a big push overall in consumerizing your enterprise solution, so that because it ties back to the customer satisfaction and all those KPI. And that's where a lot of CIOs and cares about, who are investing a lot of time and money around digital transformation.
Very good point. Very good point. It is, yeah, it's literally different roles. I'm also coming from working my own startup on AI projects versus working a corporate. The responsibilities definitely change. Thank you, Manjeet. So we have a couple of the group discussion topics, and maybe we can dive into. You can unmute Ashok, Shyamala, Ali, Manjeet. So the first question, actually, this is coming a lot. What were the biggest challenges, actually, when you started working AI products after working on the regular products? This is more maybe on the more hands-on side, because the question comes up always: what's the difference between AI product management and product management, which is more conceptual, whereas we can maybe talk about the biggest challenges when you made the switch, or when you started working on these different products.
I'll go. I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay, so when we started, and I'll go back and maybe I'll give some examples, right? So there was one instance where we started working on the MVP of an AI model, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, if I look back, I call this as the promise or the curse of the MVP of the AI model, right? And I think some of you actually alluded to this. AI needs to be treated as an ecosystem, but more importantly, the life cycle is very iterative in nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you build, you ship code, you test, and then you ship code, and then you're just waiting and watching, right? Because when you launch an AI model, you are making some assumptions, right? You're building it based on certain training data, and your data may be balanced, it may not be sampled properly. But then when you ship the model, there are a lot of factors where when you push it into production and it's in the wild, and your assumptions may be valid, but even the situations and the data in the life could be very different. The environment might have changed, right? So while it all looked like, hey, we did this, the human judgment, it looks so nice and perfect, right? We are satisfied with the precision and the recall, and we push it out. But then after we pushed it out, we learned that the model was not performing really well.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, that's when thinking ahead is very important of the AI life cycle, planning for the iteration. What ended up happening when while we did instrument for measuring the model and the business metrics, getting the feedback data took us time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so it's important that we plan for how, when you roll out a model, it's not like, hey, like we're done with it, it's all shipped, right? Having the right monitoring, measurement instruments, and planning ahead for how you collect feedback and iterate continuously is super critical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the model, the moment you ship, is going to be stale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. True, that's so true. I remember back at Yahoo, we had the same case. Actually, I was lucky because when I joined the team, there was also a group of data scientists who were contributing, and there was this continuous iteration cycle of experimentation where new model is thrown out and experimented, and there was this feedback aspect where all data response to the model is actually, including the features, were actually logged and fed back to our dashboards and fed back to as data, so data scientists can use it and it continuously improve it. Yeah, that doesn't exist in regular software engineering projects. So that's a really big difference. Really good point. And getting into that type of iteration habit is maybe one of the biggest changes when we move to from regular projects to AI projects. And what do you guys think? Do you guys have similar experience?
Yeah, so definitely, I would say like being in the speech recognition world, the challenges are similar to, what Ashok was pointing out for sure. So when I started, first of all, there was a lot of learning curve for me because I came from a completely non-AI world to an AI world. So now, like I mentioned, many people think about AI just like, data analytics and things like that, but it is beyond that. So that was one of the biggest thing for me, like thinking beyond that. So there was a big learning curve in the beginning just to understand how the entire system works. What do we mean when we say we are training the model? We have to constantly keep training the model in, like the NLPs to make it more natural. But then the biggest challenge we faced was, even the automated speech recognition system, which I worked on. So those have to be trained. There's a lot of grammar which has to be fed so that it understands all the different, things users are saying, the different ways they are saying, the pronunciation. So there's a lot of these kind of, data which has to be fed into the system, and it requires a lot of, understanding. So unless and until you understand how the system works, it's really difficult to actually, design for it. So in the beginning, I faced that kind of challenges because I was not understanding what the system does. And I was like, why is it not understanding and recognizing the accents? Or why is it not natural? And things like that. So definitely, learning curve is a very big thing here. Like knowing how the system works, what are the ins and outs. You don't have to code things, but knowing the basics will help you.
Yeah, so I'll throw out my perspective as well. So for me, the biggest challenge was, I work in the IT service management product line, and we had a lot of different capabilities and application in that solution. And those are our, I would say, the most stable product and bread and butter for ServiceNow until today. And when we started thinking about, hey, how we can provide more intelligence across our, the service delivery, across our processes that runs across those products. But when we started looking at, okay, we have these kind of models, and then here's some of the, got excited about some of the initial problem. Maybe we can do the classification on the ticket assignment when somebody report how to find the right agent. But the truth was that those applications were not designed or instrumented in such a way that they can give us the right data. And that was, I would say, biggest learning. And then from that point on, we kind of pivoted as as an engineering organization to more of an AI first approach. So anything we build and design, and we think it's from the very early on, it's like, hey, what are the kind of lesson learned, what we want to these applications to do when we say quote unquote intelligence process optimization. Because if your foundation and your instrumentation is not right, it's very hard to get the results and drive the adoption across customers. So I would say this, have this AI first approach from the beginning is very crucial for long-term success.
So so I think everybody mentioned everything as far as like moving from non-technical to more like technical product experiences. I want to add a few bullet points on the other side, basically. Hopefully that's useful for some people. Like, especially for me, I think for some of these, so I'm coming from, for example, technical background. I started from AI product, and then actually I moved and did like non-AI product as well. Just like a few bullets on that. And again, like hopefully this is useful for you guys that are listening, because I think like as a PM, probably you are going to do a bunch of different type of PM job, right? So I think the transition from the other side was a little bit harder for me for a bunch of different reasons. One is that when you are working with the AI product, ML product, it's very tech and data driven, and you make most of your decisions based on data, right? So when you go to something that is like actually very different, right? Then there are a bunch of other factors come into place, and you have to understand those as well. So for example, some of my work actually required a lot of policy work or legal work. Not that AI work doesn't require those things, but less of those things, right? So it's basically even like more collaborations with newer type of people and functions. And I think as part of that, the other thing that, at least for my personal experience, I felt that like it's more on the PM's shoulder to make the decisions, right? Again, for the AI type of products, you usually look at the data. It's easy to make the decision for like anybody. There are going to be a bunch of other problems or products that are very different. For example, some of the societal issues that we work at Facebook, that you have to make the decision and you have to be more assertive. So that was a learning for me. And I think that was a very different experience. And the last thing, I think it's also important like to understand your personality type. So for me, like after doing like a lot of these type of products, like both AI and non-AI, I've learned that I'm a little bit more comfortable with the AI ones. One is that because I have technical background, so it's a little bit more comfortable for me. But the other one is that this is interesting and maybe funny, but like I think I'm in the middle of introvert and extrovert, so I'm basically 50-50. So when I work on the like a AI ML focused teams, I usually see myself as a very extrovert person in comparison with everybody else. So usually the team is like maybe 10 ML engineers and like 2 data scientists, and they're usually very quiet, very like hardworking, like building the models. Again, like this is not true for everybody, but like for me, they see me as a very vocal PM leader that they require. So when I go to other teams, and that was my experience in a bunch of different teams I had, so sometimes I become more like an introvert. And I think as a PM, they're looking more of like a leadership. Doesn't mean that like as an introvert, you cannot lead. You obviously can do. But basically my point is that like depending on your personality type, you may find some new challenges when you're working on things that are very technical and on the back end, versus things that are require more like collaboration with different people, like you have to go and talk to users. So something to keep in mind for people listening.
Interesting. Yeah, it says, yeah, I have the same challenges actually between switching between some non-AI projects, because every once in a while it comes along, right? Although you're working on some platform, for example, there's maybe a database project going on, which doesn't have anything to do with AI actually. Although you may be going to store AI data in there, well, the team is working on a database. It's pure engineering work, and doing that switch constantly with working with data scientists, and no turning around working just with engineers on the regular sprint schedule is definitely challenging. So that actually brings this topic of, there is really no book for product management, right? So you constantly have to change your attitude from project to project, even not from company or from team to team. It's like from project to project. Do you guys feel that? You have to become introvert, you have to become leader. Sometimes you have to become really introvert, extrovert, like constantly, that constant challenge between trying to find your place in the project, right?
Yeah, so I can definitely say that because coming from, the sync world, which was completely different, which was a different project, to now into the autonomous, what you are saying completely makes sense. Like within the project to project also, there's a lot of difference. Even within the organization, the understanding is different at different levels. So, while you are, leading, you also have to, educate the team and make them aware. So that's those kind of things as well, which adds on.
If I can add there, I think what makes the product management role so exciting is exactly this, right? It's challenging, but it's also exciting. And each team and each set of customers that you're trying to solve the problem for have their own, what I call microcultures, right? The dynamics are different. The problem statements are different, right? And inherently PMs have to be like multilingual, right? You need to have a high emotional intelligence. Sometimes you got to, a lot of times you have to put the success of the team in front of you, and then not take credit when there is success. But when there's failure, you have to stand up and really take accountability for it, right? So I think depending on the circles that you have for the different products or projects that you're wearing the PM hat for, you have to really say, when do I actually lean in? When do I actually take a backseat, right? A lot of times it's about being listening mode, right? Rather than being the most vocal, and trying to say, how do you actually make the biggest impact? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to create impact for the customers and for your team, right? And I think that mindset really helps.
Interesting too, on the point of taking the fall, right? Especially with AI project, because error is part of the solution, right? Without the error, you cannot train a model, or they cannot actually converge to the ideal. So there are so many error possibilities with AI projects or models, which impacts directly the customer. It is, I can say there is more taking the blame on all those failures, especially customer facing issues, than actually being able to take any credit. In fact, right. I don't think I took any credit in the last maybe more than a year in any project.
But I think if I can add that, right, it's all about objectivity and transparency, right? Mm-hmm. When we create that objectivity and say, okay, we failed, right? But what can we learn? Why did we fail, right? And then being transparent about it. Again, sometimes it's not always possible, but in cases where if you lean in to say that we want to act with integrity, show the transparency to say, why did we fail, right? Is it because we didn't understand the problem statement and the business objective in the first place, or we made some wrong assumptions, or we rolled out it prematurely? But what is it, right? And then being able to learn and iterate in an objective manner is super critical.
Correct.
Yeah, and so one more thing I noticed, Adnan, is specifically like when you're working on an AI project versus non-AI project, it's like usually the best practice is that whatever you are promising from the expectation standpoint, how you can over deliver. But on the AI project, I see that you do the demos and get excited and you basically over promise. But when actually the product goes out of the door, or when customer starts to use it, that's when I see the expectation mismatch. Versus, hey, I see we'll be able to automate 60% of work, but now it's like, or when we are looking at the quality of the automation, the confidence level, it's not at par. So they try it in a non-prod, and then it never reaches to the production for at least 1 year, or they say, no, maybe we'll try in the next release. So. And that's where ultimately, if your product is not adopted, that's the very bad situation to be in, because then it's like all the effort and blood and sweat you and your team put in. It's like then you come back to the drawing board and then see hey, how we can and so I think that's the learning, and goes back to the point I was making earlier. It's the being transparent, as Ashok said, and then having that mindset first. And and you have to be patient, because the AI has come a long way, but still to deliver value, no matter the simple use cases, it takes time. I mean, in our case, some of the models like we launched more than 2 years ago, and now they are on this adoption path. Until then, it was more of the the POC projects, and so yeah, I think that's the
like Jeffrey Moore says, it's crossing the chasm, right? With every product, not just the company, but with every product we release, we have to handle that for a long time until you cross all the chasms. Then you actually target the majority. Yeah, that definitely it's not easy.
I'll give a thumbs up to Manjeet on the being patient aspect of it, right? It takes time, right? And setting expectations with your stakeholders upfront to say that we have to be patient, we have to iterate on it before we deliver value, because a lot of projects get shelved too prematurely before they realize a couple of iterations.
Right. Yeah, especially when you first pulled in the project, which was already decided that a strategic decision was made that there's going to be an investment. The expectation I also see is way above what is possible. So I have actually a picture on one of my presentations. On the left side, I have this sports car. That is the expectation, and there is a bicycle on the left on the right. That is actually the capability. So capability and expectation is most of the time off at the beginning. And to your point, Ashok, you try to bring visibility and show that, hey, this is what is possible really, and this is where we can go. And of course, at the time, getting buy-in, it's not that easy all the time. Yeah, great topic. So we are approaching actually the end of our event. Now, one last question maybe we can discuss here is that I want to really leave the watchers here with some ideas about top 3 suggestions to product managers actually who want to work on AI products. So could be how should they prepare for interviews, could be actually how should they apply, what jobs they should go after, and then what should they do on the interviews, or when they get hired, what should they do in general, how should they go about these AI products. So I can throw in one actually to start with, and that is looking for companies like switching from product management and looking for a new job in the field of AI. I see that people get confused where to go. There is really a mental model where you can work. So I would divide the industry into verticals and horizontal side. Verticals, you can go after e-commerce and agriculture or automotive or any of these industries. So you have to find something you really like, you're passionate about. And it is not any industry. It is usually one or the other industry for you. And every industry has their own cons and their own customers and own pros. So you have to know what industry you're going in. And second, you have to actually look what type of businesses you're going into. And there is usually product businesses, service businesses, and consulting businesses, education, and maybe a few more, but especially the biggest one, product and service. And AI product management in these two different businesses is completely different. And it's also consulting, the third one. So you have to really pick the right place you want to be, especially if you look at from perspective of B2B or B2C, where do you really want to work. And then in the product businesses and in the service business, there's actually one more layer, and that is there are companies who produce AI solutions like for the AI industry, like Google AI, cloud AI department or a group creates AI solutions literally for the industry, like AI frameworks, AI tools, AI infrastructure, AI chips. Now, that is a totally different product management responsibility. Whereas there are companies who utilize AI in their industry. Let's say eBay is utilizing AI everywhere, but for e-commerce, they're really not creating AI. Adobe, the same thing. Adobe uses AI everywhere in their solutions, but however, they're really not creating AI chips like Google does. So I would separate also companies that creating AI solutions in their industry versus creating AI solutions, period. Okay, so that's my suggestion to who is going into a product management. Look at industry aspects. Do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, so Adnan, I'll underscore your point, like your interest and then picking that industry, because to me, as I mentioned, I really enjoy problem solving in the area of health and fitness. But although the work we are doing at ServiceNow was not exactly that, but then you can still come up with ideas and build the product along those lines. The second, I think the important aspect to me then, and I always tell it to junior product managers or interns that come ask the same question, is that there are some very basic skills. I call it analytical sense. And if you want to be an AI product manager, it is better if you build that analytical sense early on. And it is very basic, like, the able to use small, simple SQL commands, because, you will be in the midst of data. Although, the expectation is not that you'll build model, but at the same time if you have, let's say, some data, or it doesn't matter the tool, it could be Tableau or Excel or, use pivot table. But to me, that is super important, because it takes time, to build that muscle. But the sooner let's say if somebody is not able to get that opportunity at work, find some other side projects or just engage in the community, and because that goes a long way. Once you have built that, it really helps your day-to-day PM job or life when you are in that role, and bringing everybody onto kind of the talking the same lingo and able to look into we talked about transparencies, like the problem space and the solution space. You will be able to understand it more clearly. Otherwise, it will be like all hey, my architect said this, and should I believe it blindly, or can I ask good questions?
I can add a few things. So starting from a very actually important but basic questions, like first, like even before PM for AI, ask the question of why do you want to become a PM? And I think this is a question we get all the time from a lot of people, right? Or like, what is the PM? I think that's the important, especially if you're like a technical and you want to be an AI PM, like ask yourself, why not like being an ML engineer, or why not being an engineer manager? what is the difference, right? So why do you want to be a PM? I think that's super important. Maybe is it that you have passion about people problems? Is it because you want to collaborate with people more? Is it because like you can see the vision, you can come up with a strategy? I think this is important because for some people, maybe it makes more sense to become like a very good ML engineer or like an engineer manager. So that's the first one. The second one is that if you are already a PM, like ask yourself again, like why AI, right? Like, is it that like you feel that you have the expertise that other PM don't have? You feel that like you don't want to be, again, like very close to the product, like maybe you are not interested in design or user research. So I think those are important things to ask yourself. So those are the first two things. And then like some quick comments about like how you can do the transition. So for different type of people. So if you're in a startup, for example, if you're like a CEO of a startup, or if you're an engineer in a startup, if you're really interested in becoming a PM for AI, do some practices for yourself. See if you can communicate what you are doing technically at the high level to some people that don't understand ML, right? So I think that's a good practice. See if you can go and talk to your users and see if that it can influence the way that you build your models. Like if you can do that end to end, I think you are a good fit for a PM because you understand the tech, but you also understand the user needs, right? So that's for like a more like a smaller companies you're working. If you're in a big tech company already, and if you're doing a PM job, but not in an AI side, go and see that, like, is there anything in your day-to-day job on the PM side that you have that is more technical, and see if you're interested. Go and talk to engineers, brainstorm with them, and see again, like if you can do that, if you can change the strategy and vision and the roadmap of your team based on the needs that you understand from the people. But again, like going deeper and like say, like this is the type of modeling that we want to use. This is like we want to go out with neural databases, right? So see if you can do that. And I think those are the very good starting questions and reflections for you, and then practices. So I would start from those. And then if you see this is a good fit, I do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't push for it that like this is something that you want to do.
Yeah, that is a really good point. And I would like to add, like what Manjeet was saying, like first and foremost thing is, like, where do you want to go, right? Like there are different industries. So I chose from a retail to automotive industry, which was a completely different thing because I enjoyed being in the automotive space. Autonomous and, the self-driving cars itself is a very fascinating. So pick the domain which you are really fascinated about. That's important. The second thing is, day in and day out as a PM, you will have to interact with the data scientists and, like machine learning experts and everyone. So you should not feel like an alien. So important thing is, learning the skills. So learn about the concepts, learn about the technologies, learn what are those important things in machine learning. You don't have to code anything, but knowing how the algorithms work, or what does NLP mean, or what does like the different kind of technologies or AI concepts mean, will definitely help you be more productive in your conversations day in and day out.
I can make one final comment on that, right? Great points raised by the panel here. One thing is, as you learn about AI, the life cycle, the ecosystem, as much as you are learning about it, it is very important and super critical that you educate your stakeholders about the value of AI and the iterative nature of it, right? A lot of times we assume, right now, there are certain cases, and Ali mentioned this, right? For example, in LinkedIn, if you're working with a recommendation team, you're working with a relevance team, right? These guys know the stuff, right? You don't have to. But on the other side, you're working with a business team, right? And I've had these cases where we're working with a risk or a policy team. And for them, you have to speak the language. And that's really where the PMs, as a core PM skills, you're already doing it. But then lean in and try to educate them about what does AI really mean, what value, why you should actually be bringing, right? So try to lean in on those aspects rather than, I would say, trying to go and try to figure out what is the latest in the deep learning model architecture that I want to, right? Yes, that's good knowledge, but that's an opportunity cost. Where do you want to spend your time, and where do you think you can have the biggest impact?
Yeah, very, very true. Very true. Yeah, it is. I see that a lot of people randomly land in certain teams. I also coach a couple of product managers, and I would say, yeah, talk to another AI product manager in your company or in the area, and ask them to help you, coach you maybe, or it could be even just 1 hour every month. to answer questions or interest. So that would be a good direction. But thank you, guys. This was a great panel. Now we have a couple of questions I collected from the audience, and I will go over and try to answer these. But feel free to jump in and add your perspective if you have something to say. So first question is how AI product management is different from normal product management. And I think we answered already in different from different perspectives. Now, if I would summarize, actually, that's also something I teach in my courses, is that there are a couple aspects. First, you need to have core product management skills. I think that is the same. There is no difference. And second, you need to know the AI ecosystem. And regardless, actually, in whatever level you work, platform or on the customer side, you need to understand what are the components of AI projects. That there are models, that there's a platform, that there's maybe you have to do buy versus rent trade-off, but you need to understand the ecosystem. And second, I think that's the biggest difference is the iterative approach of data science. It is maybe data science today is more agile than most software engineering teams. That's what I see. It's so interesting. And most engineering teams I actually work with, they're agile-ish or Scrum-like, or they don't fully implement. But I see that data science teams are more iterative. They constantly deliver working model at every iteration. And that is one of the agile principles from the first 12 agile principles, original 12 agile principles, to deliver working software at every iteration. And they create a model. They can even create model and on week one, the base model, baseline. Maybe it's terrible. Maybe the accuracy is 10%. But still, it is a working model. You can actually deploy it, and it will work. So in that terms, you have to get used to that constant iteration and improvement and that life cycle. Then, of course, bridging the gap between data science and engineering. That's something I see all the time. There is a big disconnect, and closing that gap through understanding the data science requirement, carrying that over to engineering, understanding engineering constraints, and carrying that back to data science. I think those are the biggest differences. And so that's the first question. Anything you guys want to add? Or?
Yeah, so I'll throw in one point, Adnan, on the bridging the gap, and that's how I did. Let's say you're working on product which are kind of totally non-AI, and now the AI products is there is another place in between, which means that you own a product and you will be consuming the AI. Right, so you're not actually working with a team that actually builds the model, or we call it a platform team, platform ML team. But while you're owning the other applications and I think that's the middle place in my mind is before you transition all the the other side is you take the models, and then the life cycle is the same. This model, you have to tune it. You need to think about the data quality, and I think that's one way while you're building up, that skills, and then and you feel comfortable. And the result, what Ali was mentioning, is that you really want to be on the other side, right? And so that gives the time for you to can you do this for next 5 years or 10 years, or it's just kind of a short-term excitement.
Right.
Yeah.
True. That's a good point. All right, next question. Somebody said, how do you integrate agile SDLC lifecycle with AI products, as AIDS ML teams usually depend on extensive research, and it is hard to fit in their work into weekly, bi-weekly, monthly cycles? Long question, but very valid question. So I separate research teams from day-to-day production data science team. So both are data scientists. Research is more longer term. I actually know teams, they do research for years without actually results in between, or maybe a little progress. And they're literally going for the 10x improvement. Right? And it is, and the company doesn't actually expect anything in short term. And a company who has a research team also needs the budget for research. Google has a big research team. At Yahoo, we had a very big research org, maybe a couple hundred data scientists. And big companies have these research teams. They pour money in, not because there's immediate return in 1 month or 2 weeks, but they believe that there's going to be a return in a year or two, a breakthrough, not a 10% improvement, but a breakthrough in their solution. Could be in their vertical, could be actually for the whole AI community. And it usually ends up with somebody writing a paper, getting patents, and then they integrate the technology, and that becomes actually part of their competitive advantage. On the contrary, when you're working with production teams, there you have to deliver value actually sprint over sprint. It's not that these teams can go off and start researching some natural language processing algorithm for 2 years and then coming back and bring you the patent for it. But these teams have to deliver value. These teams has to create measurable results. They have to have their own OKRs, and you should be able to track the progress on their machine learning algorithms. And these teams usually use technologies mostly that are already invented, and they're, of course, maybe it won't bring your competitive advantage in terms of model, but these will definitely satisfy your product requirements. So there's a big difference. That's why I think if I see in smaller companies, when I was consulting companies, there's this notion that, oh, AI will actually bring me competitive advantage, a sustainable profitability. Why don't we create this chatbot which can answer any question on earth? So that is literally just dreaming, and that's from the movies. And the reality is, especially if you're a small company, you don't have that research budget. You cannot support, I don't know, 50 team data scientists for years. So you have to concentrate on the low-hanging fruits. So see where AI can add value, and not maybe competitive advantage, but add value either on the bottom line or maybe on top line wherever possible.
If I can add something quickly from personal experience, I think this is a completely valid question and a source of like a lot of interesting discussions and challenges for most of us. Like as an example, so some of my teams, we used to have like weekly stand-ups. We used to have like, and so for some of the more like a very AI focused work, we changed those things to like a monthly updates, right? Or like a weekly stand-up doesn't make sense at all, right? Because there is not much progress. Again, like these are things that Adnan says more like deep and takes more time. So it's completely valid. And like I've seen that, like again, like instead of having like a weekly update, maybe you want to have a monthly update. And other things you can do, like as far as the goal and road mapping, I've seen this, like you can have, instead of like, maybe for some teams, you can have quarterly plans and goals, like very concrete goals. For some teams, you can have 6 months. For some teams, you can have one year, right? And it's completely fine. For the more you go closer to AI and like a backend side, I think it's going to take more. So it's okay to have roadmaps, not only for every month or every 3 months, maybe for 6 months or a year.
I'd like to add one thing real quick on this one. What I have seen is we follow a product-driven organization approach, right? And with that, we, marry the agile. So basically what we have started doing, all of these are good. We have to do research. We have to do pilot. We have to make sure, we are doing enough testing before we can say the product is ready and, good to be launched. So with the PDO approach, what we have done is we have broken the milestone into discovery and pilot and design and all of these different things. So each milestone we have given, a certain timeline, and we follow an agile methodology during that. For example, during the discovery, you're trying to discover the technologies or, what kind of data you need and those kind of things, right? And you're doing all the analysis during that phase. Then slowly moving into when you are doing the design phase, you are designing the interfaces, you are designing the prototypes, you are designing all of the things required, and then designing, the interfaces and all. In the pilot phase, we actually have something ready. And then what we do is we take it to the market. We do the testing with a couple of months of testing or a couple of years, depending on autonomous car, we need to do a lot more, right? And then based on that, we will go and iterate or come back. So with these different pieces we have broken in, we follow an agile methodology with stand-ups and all of those. So we are making sure it is being delivered on time, and we are capturing and doing justice to all the different parts, and not just, like leaving the research for some other team and, design for the other team.
Interesting. Ashok, you were saying something?
Yeah, so I think fully agree with all the points raised here, right? So now there are cases where it's ultimately it comes down to trade-offs, right? As PMs, you're trying to say, what do you do in a tactical business delivery, impactful manner versus what do you invest in mid to long term, right? Now, there are cases where there are different teams and organizations that are opulent, where research can go on in parallel when compared to your tactical business delivery. Now, in some cases, that cannot be the case, because you may just have one data scientist and one engineer, or two researchers and one engineer, right? Now, and that's kind of where the not so happy situations arise, right? How do you actually make sure that you are actually being agile in a manner where you're delivering to business, but then you're also advancing the state of the art? So some of the things what we have done is trying to say, in one case for a computer vision model, we went with getting into some technicalities here. We said, let's pick a quick, not non-deep learning approach, because we have to collect lots of data. The iteration process is long. Let's do with something that's quick and easy, because ultimately, what do we want to learn and measure? We want to learn about adoption. We want to learn about user experience. And is this good enough, right? It wasn't exactly an advanced deep learning model. So we rolled out something quickly in an agile manner. And while that was being learned, because the end user does not care, right? They all care about experience. They care about accuracy of the model. Yes, it wasn't as accurate. But then while we had the bandwidth, the business and the product teams were iterating on it, we went and iterated on the longer term deep learning model, right? So there are some creative ways in which you could take this, and the product has a big play in terms of saying, how do you actually prioritize? If you peg yourself to say, what are we trying to drive in the short term and the long term, and say, what do we want to learn in the short term? Some of these trade-offs can be done in parallel, but it's not easy. I will acknowledge that.
Yeah, both points are very true. Yeah, very true. Actually, it goes back to corporate strategy. So there is this 3 horizons of growth framework, which originally showed up in Alchemy of Growth. And so actually McKinsey's, right? And 3 horizons of growth says that you have your core business running your core operations. That is actually your Jeffrey Moore's language is definition for that is your performance organization and your production organization, productivity organization, where it generates money. So that is your income. And then there is this research organization. This is the 3rd horizon, the future business. And the future business is more incubation. So it cannot steal time and money or resources from your core business. And you shouldn't actually mix these things together. And there in between, the 2nd horizon is where you integrate, and Jeffrey Moore names it transformation, and where you transform the idea, the research you got, into your core business. So the timelines of these 3 different horizons is really different. Your core business is operating in this weekly, and your research is operating maybe in a yearly cycle, and in between you try to integrate. And and also in Shyamala's example, where you can actually have everything doing in a bigger team, you still have this understanding that there is a research going on, which is going to take long. So I can really not count on them in this week, next week, or 3 weeks from now. But you need to have the resource to support them, and you need to have the right people. Also, people working in these different organizations have different mindset. A resource organization has this mindset of trying to find the next mountain. They're not trying to climb this mountain, so they're trying to find the next mountain. Whereas somebody in the productivity organization is actually climbing the current mountain. So having this balance in the same team, especially in Shyamala's example, is even more difficult for the product manager. And like in different organizations, you have the literal separate buildings, separate teams. They don't even see each other, which is much more easier situation. All right, so we are out of time. I have actually quite a bit of questions left here, but happy to answer anything on LinkedIn. So I will post part of these videos on LinkedIn, so you guys can watch. It's on YouTube. It wasn't published on YouTube. There was only a small couple hundred people actually accessing it. So I will also open it on YouTube. But Shyamala, Ashok, Manjeet, Ali, thank you very much. This was actually a treat. Thank you for giving your time Saturday morning. I know this is important time to spend with your family, but sharing with this time with the community, I think it's very noble. Thank you very much.